There is a family in America worth over $160 billion combined. They own Snickers, M&M's, Twix, Skittles, Pedigree dog food, and dozens of other brands you buy every single week. Their company pulls in over $45 billion in revenue every year, and almost nobody can tell you anything real about the people behind it. The Mars family has never taken their company public. No stock tickers, no shareholder calls, no press conferences. They have spent over a century building one of the most profitable consumer goods empires on Earth, while actively refusing to be seen. When Forbes tries to interview them, they decline. When journalists show up, they leave. This is the story of how a sickly kid from Minnesota, whose early candy businesses kept failing, built the foundation for a dynasty worth more than the GDP of most countries, and how his son, who got pushed out of the family company, went to Europe, built his own empire from scratch, and eventually came back to take the whole thing. But before any of that, this story starts at a kitchen table with a sick child and a mother making chocolate.
For only 16 pence, you still get the biggest ever Mars bar. The one that gives you so much more than any other bar. Mars, with all the goodness of milk, sugar, glucose, and thick, thick chocolate. And that great Mars taste. Biggest Mars bar ever. Best value around.
A Mars day helps you work, rest, and play.
The man who learned candy from his mother. Frank Clarence Mars was born on September 24, 1883, in Hancock, Minnesota. When he was young, Frank developed a serious illness widely believed to be polio. The illness kept him housebound for long stretches, unable to go to school or move around like other children. His mother, Alva, taught him to hand-dip chocolates at home to keep him occupied during those years. That was the beginning of everything. Frank grew up, got married, and had a son named Forrest in 1904. The marriage ended, and Forrest went to live with his maternal grandparents in Saskatchewan, Canada. Frank remarried and started trying to build a candy business. He failed, multiple times. In 1902, Frank launched his first candy venture in Tacoma, Washington. It went under. He tried again in Minneapolis. That failed too. He lost money, moved cities, and kept going. For nearly 2 decades, Frank Mars was a man who understood candy and could not build a lasting business around it. The product knowledge was real. The execution kept collapsing. What matters about that period is not the failure itself. It is the fact that Frank never moved into a different industry. He stayed in candy through 2 decades of losses because he genuinely understood it. That specific stubbornness is what eventually paid off. And when it did, it paid off in a way that nobody around him saw coming. The bar that started everything. In 1920, Frank founded the Marrow Bar Company in Minneapolis. In 1922, he moved operations to Chicago, where the candy industry had larger distribution networks and more established infrastructure, and renamed the business the Frank C. Mars Candy Company. In 1923, he created the product that changed his family's financial history permanently. The Milky Way bar launched that year. It was built around a chocolate malt nougat center, topped with caramel and coated in chocolate. The concept worked because nougat gave the bar significant volume without requiring large amounts of expensive chocolate. It was filling, satisfying, and cheap enough for ordinary consumers. It sold immediately. In its first year, the Milky Way generated roughly $800,000 in sales. Revenue kept climbing from there. Frank followed with Snickers in 1930. He named the bar after his family's favorite horse. Today, Snickers is the best-selling candy bar in the world, a position it has held for decades. In 1932, Frank added 3 Musketeers. The original version came in 3 separate pieces with different flavors: chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry, which is why it carried that name. During World War II, Mars dropped the vanilla and strawberry portions because of sugar rationing and produced only the chocolate piece. The bar has stayed that way ever since. By the early 1930s, Frank Mars was one of the most successful candy manufacturers in America. He built a working farm and estate in Tennessee called Milky Way Farm. Frank Mars died on April 8, 1934. He was 50 years old. The son he had sent away to Canada years earlier was watching everything that happened next from Europe, and he had been building something of his own. The son who was pushed out. While Frank was establishing himself in Chicago, Forrest Mars Sr. had grown up in Canada, being raised by grandparents. Forrest reconnected with his father around 1929 and joined the company. He came with ideas about how the business should expand internationally, particularly into Europe. Frank, who had spent 2 decades failing before finding his footing, was not open to being directed by a son who had not been part of those years. The relationship fractured. Frank gave Forrest a financial stake. Various accounts have placed this figure at around $50,000, and Forrest left for England in 1932. He was 28 years old. He had a modest sum of money and no established operation of his own. Whether the departure was a genuine opportunity or a forced exit, the outcome is the same. Forrest went to Europe and built something that would eventually dwarf what he left behind. Most people cut loose from a family business with limited capital disappear from the story. Forrest Sr. did not disappear. He went to work immediately and with a level of intensity that defined the rest of his life. What he built in Europe over the next 2 decades gave him the leverage to eventually reshape the entire Mars operation. But first, he needed to prove the model worked outside America. Building a separate empire across the Atlantic. Forrest set up a small factory in Slough, just outside London, and began manufacturing a chocolate bar he called the Mars Bar. The product was similar in logic to the Milky Way: nougat, caramel, chocolate coating, but richer and denser, built for British consumer preferences. The bar found its audience quickly. The British Mars Bar became one of the most popular confections in the United Kingdom, a position it has held for nearly a century. But Forrest was not only watching the candy market. He observed that British consumers were spending significant money on canned food for dogs and cats. The pet food market was fragmented. Forrest acquired a small canned pet food operation called Chappie, which sold dog food, and applied the same principles he used for candy: consistent product quality, affordable pricing, wide distribution. Chappie became a dominant dog food brand in the United Kingdom and laid the groundwork for what Mars would later build into the Pedigree and Whiskas brands, now among the most recognized pet food names in the world. Forrest also developed an interest in food science during his European years and became involved with a parboiled rice concept that retained nutrients and cooked without going sticky. He eventually brought this back to the United States and built it into Uncle Ben's, a brand Mars still owns today under the name Ben's Original. By the late 1930s, Forrest Mars Sr. had built a legitimate, diversified food operation in Europe, entirely independent of the American company. His next move came from watching soldiers in Spain, and it produced the most recognizable candy product in American history: the idea he saw in Spain. During the Spanish Civil War in the late 1930s, Forrest Mars Sr. reportedly encountered soldiers eating small chocolate pellets coated in a hard sugar shell. The shell kept the chocolate from melting in the heat, making it practical for carrying in a pocket or a pack. Forrest recognized the concept immediately and understood its commercial potential. He returned to the United States and partnered with Bruce Murray, the son of William Murray, who was then president of the Hershey Chocolate Company. The partnership was practical on both sides. Forrest needed access to Hershey's chocolate supply during a period when chocolate rationing was tightening. Bruce Murray brought that connection. Together, they founded a new company and began producing the product in 1941. They named it M&M's. The name came directly from their surnames, Mars and Murray. The product launched with the United States military as the primary customer. M&M's were practical for soldiers in the same way they had been for Spanish Civil War fighters. The hard sugar shell meant the chocolate survived heat without melting into a mess. The military bought them in bulk and distributed them in field rations. By the time the war ended and rationing lifted, M&M's were already a known product with an established production operation. Forrest eventually bought out Bruce Murray's stake in the business. The exact timing and terms have not been extensively publicized, but by the time M&M's became a mass consumer product available to the general American public in the late 1940s, Forrest Mars controlled them entirely. The tagline that M&M's melt in your mouth, not in your hand, was introduced in 1954 and remains one of the most recognized advertising lines in consumer goods history. Taking back the throne. Frank Mars had died in 1934, leaving the American Mars Company to his widow Ethel and the broader family structure. Forrest had been building his own operation for over 2 decades, a UK candy business, European pet food brands, rice products, and M&Ms in America. By the 1960s, he was in a position to move. In 1964, Forrest Mars Sr. merged his operations with the original Mars Company and took control of the combined entity. He bought out his siblings' ownership stakes and consolidated everything under one structure. The man who had been given a financial stake and sent to Europe in 1932 now ran the entire operation his father had built, plus everything he had constructed on his own over 30 years. Forrest Sr. ran the company with an intensity that left an impression on everyone around him. He paid himself the same salary as his senior managers. He reportedly walked factory floors and tasted products without warning. He believed in what he called the 5 principles: quality, responsibility, mutuality, efficiency, and freedom, which Mars still publishes as its guiding values today. He also reportedly had a fierce temper and created a demanding, pressurized work environment that drove significant turnover among executives. Forrest Mars Sr. stepped back from running the company in 1973, handing control to his sons Forrest Jr. and John, with daughter Jacqueline also holding a significant ownership stake. He died on July 1, 1999, at the age of 95. By that point, the company he and his father had built was already a global operation, generating billions of dollars annually across candy, pet food, and food products. The acquisition that changed everything. For most of its history, Mars competed directly with Wrigley, the Chicago-based gum company that also happened to be a privately held family business. In 2008, Mars acquired Wrigley for approximately $23 billion, with Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway providing a portion of the financing. The deal was one of the largest acquisitions in consumer goods history. The Wrigley acquisition brought Juicy Fruit, Double Mint, Orbit, and Extra Gum into the Mars portfolio. It also brought Skittles and Starburst, both of which Wrigley had acquired in previous years. That single transaction transformed Mars from a candy and pet food company into something considerably larger, a diversified confectionery and snack business with a global distribution network that few competitors could match. Today, Mars Inc. operates across more than 80 countries. Its portfolio includes M&M's, Snickers, Twix, Milky Way, Three Musketeers, Skittles, Starburst, Extra Gum, Pedigree, Whiskas, Royal Canin, Ben's Original, and a growing veterinary care division called Banfield Pet Hospital. The company employs over 150,000 people worldwide. The family itself remains entirely private. Forrest Jr., John, and Jacqueline Mars and their descendants retain full ownership. No outside shareholders, no public disclosures beyond the minimum required by law. Forbes has estimated the combined Mars family fortune at over $160 billion, which makes them among the wealthiest families on Earth. They have consistently declined to discuss it in public. The Mars story is not a straight line from success to success. It starts with a sick child learning to make candy because there was nothing else to do. It runs through 2 decades of business failures. It splits into 2 separate operations across 2 continents, run by a father and son who could not work together. It reconnects when the son who was sent away comes back and takes control of everything. What the Mars family built sits in your grocery cart right now. It is in your dog's bowl. It was in the ration pack of soldiers in World War II. It has been generating tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue for decades, while the people behind it refuse to be photographed, interviewed, or discussed in any serious detail. Frank Mars learned to make chocolate because he was too sick to go to school. His son Forrest took a buyout in a plane to England rather than accept a secondary role. That combination of stubbornness, competitive intensity, and refusal to settle is what built one of the most valuable private companies in the world. Every Snickers bar and every bag of M&Ms you have ever opened is the product of those 2 men and the century of decisions that followed them. The family has kept it private this long. There is no reason to think that changes anytime soon.